It's the weekend, and it's almost time for Pacers-Bucks Game 1. Why Game 1 is so important in this series, why Pascal Siakam is a huge X factor on and off the court, and more on why I picked the Pacers in 7 on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Saturday. It's the weekend, but it's the playoffs, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we're going bonus episodes. It's the playoffs. We got it. The play-in just wrapped up on Locked On NBA. You can hear me talk about that, and the playoff field is set, and it's time to focus on the Pacers, and specifically Game 1 Sunday night for the Pacers. This will be my last episode before Game 1. I know I said I'd go every day starting from that Heat weekend for the Pacers the rest of the season, but one, I forgot how early the Hawks game was last weekend and didn't do an extra one then, and two, the Pacers playing on Sunday. For this one, we've got you covered on all the Pacers-Bucks topics. So this one is the Game 1 preview. Then we'll keep rolling every single day. Today we're talking about Game 1 specifically, why it's so important in a series, what it means for the Pacers. We're going to talk a lot about Pascal Siakam. I just wrote about him, and I want to dive into why I am thinking more about his importance today and in this series than I was previously. And then at the end, a stat or two to explain why I picked the Pacers in 7 games. But we start with Game 1 tomorrow night in Milwaukee at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Look, I don't think it can be overstated how important the first game of a series is in every series, but specifically this one. There's the obvious dynamic of why it's important, and that Giannis, by all accounts, real doubts, air quotes, about him playing in Game 1 or even beyond that, potentially. My operating assumption is Game 1 out, Game 2 maybe. Game 3 would be after 2 weeks, and then we'll see from there, but that is all assumptions based on reporting, based on calf injury timelines, based on how Doug McDermott talked about his calf injury during the season. It's all a guess, given what other people are saying. But that's where I'm at right now. Apparently, shout out to Eric Name from The Athletic for being all over the injury beat for the Bucks right now. He had to ask Doc Rivers at practice about Giannis and his injury earlier this week, and he had to do it again yesterday because Bucks president Peter Fagan apparently said Giannis definitely will not be back for Sunday on a local radio show. So it's pretty fair to say Giannis unlikely to play in Game 1 given all these factors. And so, obviously, from that alone, Game 1 is important for the Pacers. Even if there's a chance that's the only game of the series he doesn't play. And I don't know if that is or isn't the case. Winning any game he is not available is just massive for the Pacers because as the Pacers have seen up close when he scored 60 whatever points and he grabbed 1 million rebounds against them all season, and at his absolute best, he just spins through the lane, is an unstoppable force who draws free throws and scores and makes the Bucks offense hum. If they can win any game he doesn't play, they give themselves a better chance, right? They reduce it to needing to win 3 out of 6 instead of 4 out of 7, or even 2 out of 5, or whatever fraction you can come up with. But for Game 1 specifically, on the operating assumption he doesn't play, that alone makes it important. But the stat that everyone knows about, but is just jarring to see written out. Game 1 winners in the NBA, in the playoffs, win 77.9% of the time. This is for Orlando Basketball, who tracks every freaking series in the playoffs, in regular season series. That's how I tracked my tiebreakers. 672 wins, 191 series losses for the team that wins Game 1 and is up 1-0 in a series. In the first round specifically, the highest percentage of Game 1 winners win, which makes sense because typically in the first round is when the largest gap of team quality exists. And that may not be the case in this series specifically, but in the first round of NBA playoff series, 79.5% of Game 1 winners win the series, right? They add so much into the mix, right? Winning 4 out of 6 is what you have to do if you lose Game 1. That's hard. That's really hard to do. So math also suggests game one, extremely important for the series. And I think with game one, the key part of it is kind of how it makes a series flow from the winners and losers perspective, right? If you're the loser of game one, and I think this is true a little bit for the winner, but less so. Like if you're the loser of game one, you are now the team that has to adjust first by default, right? You can't run out even if you love your game plan and you just think you miss shots, you can't run it out again and risk losing again that way because then you have to win 4 out of 5, right? And game one specifically sets a tone for the series in that the team that plays better or has the style of play that is forcing the other team to react more, even in just the first game, is critical because the other team has to adjust first. And so let's say you have your list of a coaching staff's first 5 adjustments in a series. You got to go down the list first to do that. And that means the other team can wait longer and their margin for error is wider. And they can just have a game where they go crazy shooting and it totally ruins your adjustments. Like game one increases your margin for error. It allows you to be more careful with adjustments and not be so reactive to the results of a game. Like you never want to be the team that has to adjust first because the other team can adjust to your adjustment and make it less effective or more neutralized. And they're able to do that because they're winning the series, right? They have more time to also adjust and win later on. So it's obviously not the be all end all that a team that wins game one is going to win the series. The Pacers, last time they won a game one against LeBron and the Cavs in 2018, they lost that series, right? Obviously, that is very familiar to a lot of fans. But I think this particular game one, between the numbers, between the adjustments that are going to be very interesting for a young team in general, right? How do they execute adjustments throughout a series? How does a team that calls their offense random, how do they continue to adjust, even if it's just minor tweaks throughout a series? And of course, Giannis Antetokounmpo's health status. This is a particularly important game one for an inexperienced Pacers team that's going to have to adjust on the fly. I think the Pacers are going to be a good adjustment team in the playoffs. Carlisle's a very smart coach. I think he usually pushes buttons that I think make sense, right? And they're justifiable and explainable, which is all I can ask. Obviously, throughout games, we've seen that him and Tyrese Haliburton have good synergy of adjusting mid-game. That's why that's my operating theory on why they're typically very good in third quarters, right? I think they're going to be a very good throughout the series adjusting team. I don't think they'll wait too long to do so like some coaches do. I don't think they'll start too far away from where they need to like some coaches do. The question is, will they need to go to them first or will they need to be reactive to what the Bucks are doing? Or can they be proactive about what they expect to happen because they win, because they set a tone, because they get out and make it happen? And it all starts in game one. Game one is so critical. Now, I think that's why that statistic reigns so true, is because the team that wins game one not only has an edge in the series on literally the scoreboard, but they also can be more proactive about adjustments. Their margin for error is way bigger. The pressure's not on them. It's just a huge game for the Pacers. And I can't wait. I cannot wait for it. And I think an under-discussed factor by me, at least in the series, is Pascal Siakam. Not only for what he's going to do on the basketball court, but because of what his experience means for the Indiana Pacers. We're going to talk about that coming up right here in just a second. Before we do so, though, let's talk about Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be around the next corner? Well, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level, like the 2024 Nissan Rogue. It's perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-ins is your always updating assistant to call on for almost anything. Gone are the days of connecting your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right in to the 12.3-inch touchscreen infotainment system. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. There's also the 2024 Nissan Pathfinder and the 2024 Nissan Armada. That Armada will change what you expect from a full-size SUV. Picture a rugged 4x4 that can seat up to 8 in first-class luxury and style. Tow bigger and explore further with the 2024 Nissan Armada. Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop now at nissanusa.com. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day, free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Second listen, Locked On NBA, because I was on there with Swipe a Cam from Locked On Nuggets talking about the play-in tournament, teams that can make a run. And if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you got to turn it down because of all the shouting, switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 streaming channel designed with programming for you every day for the biggest stories in sports without the screaming. Locked On Sports Today, can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels. That part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Pacers Bucks, specifically Pascal Siakam. I found all this to be very enlightening today at practice. Look, we heard, because I asked, Rick Carlisle talk about the team's leadership. Tyrese Haliburton, Myles Turner, and for the part of the season he was here, Pascal Siakam, right? Those are the guys who have typically had strong voices for the Pacers. Doug McDermott later, just kind of talking about this team. It's new to the playoffs. It's an inexperienced group. What's this all kind of feel like? Doug McDermott, who's been in the playoffs before with the Pacers, specifically, I found it very interesting that he said it helps to have a guy like Pascal who has won a title as well, kind of guiding us through this week and guiding us getting ready, right? Siakam has reached the summit, right? He has won a championship in the NBA, and that, of course, means a lot. And I think, that I do not want to belittle anyone else who's won a championship before, but like when you win it as like a dude, like a two-time All-Star, two-time All-NBA guy, like you play a significant role in that championship. Even that means more than just someone who has won one and was on a team that won one, right? But didn't have necessarily a huge role or averaged 19 points a game during the playoffs across 24 games like Siakam did in 2019, right? Like that means a lot. Aaron Nesmith's been in the finals, Jalen Smith's been in the finals, James Johnson's been in the conference finals, right? They have playoff experienced guys on their team. But Siakam's means the most by default from a lot of stuff. And I found it interesting to hear McDermott call that out today. And so we asked Siakam a lot about leadership and what he sees in this team and all sorts of stuff that I thought his answers were very interesting, right? He talked about calmness, not getting too high or too low in any moment. And I think that's interesting. He said, I have that experience, so I'm just making sure we stay calm through it all, not getting too high with the highs, not too low with the lows. That is the playoffs. You've got to be able to stay calm. I think there's experience of that, and it just makes you feel that way. And he talked about being that calming presence for the Pacers. The coaches can help with that, but he thinks it's very important to not get too high when things are going well and not get too low when they're not, because it's a series, right? And I thought that's very interesting because in my brain, if I'm a player, especially an inexperienced player, if I have a bad game in the playoffs, I'm going to be immediately freaking out about making sure I correct all those mistakes. And if I have an amazing game, I'm going to feel like I'm on top of the world. Oh, the playoffs are easy. I can do this. I can do this every night. Blah, this is, I think that's a very noble take. And I think Siakam is uniquely qualified to give it because of his playoff experience. And obviously, the part I already talked about, winning a championship and being a very good player on that team alone is the resume that lets you talk like that lets you be somebody that has a voice that people listen to in the playoffs. But here's why I think in particular he has a very fascinating path of postseason experience to talk about this, right? He enters the league in 2016-17. He's a rookie, right? He finishes the season in the G League with the Raptors 905. He's barely playing for the pro club. Raptors make the playoffs that year. Siakam played in 2 games in that postseason. That's it. Did not score at all, right? The next season, the Raptors once again made the playoffs. And Siakam played 10 games this time, but wasn't a starter. Came off the bench, 6.6 points per game, right? So his first 2 playoffs, once he was out of the rotation completely, and once he was in the rotation, but came off the bench. Then the next year was the year they won the championship, and he, I believe, won most improved player that season, whatever. He was very good. And yes, that was the year he won most improved player, a very good player on a championship team, a key part of their success in the playoffs. And he has a bigger role, but he's the third fiddle, right? Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard ahead of him. So he goes from reserve to bench to very good player to the next year they're in again, the COVID bubble year. They play 11 games, and he's the dude. He's playing 38 minutes a game. He's taking 16 and a half shots. He's inefficient. He shot under 40%, 17 points a game, right? So he's played kind of almost every role at that point. And then in 2022, when the Raptors made it again, that year it kind of all clicked. 23 points a game. He shot 48%. He was making threes. He was dominating the glass. 6 assists per game. So that part of it is fascinating from a leadership perspective too, because he's been in every role. He can kind of relate to anyone, right? Someone who's not playing, someone who's a bench player, someone who's playing a lot and not playing well, someone who's playing a lot and not getting that many shots, someone who needs to be playing very well and high volume, but he can relate to anybody's situation and be like, yo, I've been there. Yep, I've been there. Yep, I can explain how I, evolved from this. Like that, I think, has value too. The third thing, and he went through this, he actually explained this part to us at practice on Friday, right? The other part of not getting too high or too low is based on results, right? If you win a game, if you win game one and you're the Pacers, like you got to feel great, obviously, but you can't be like, yeah, we got this. This is going to be easy. Like you got to keep being focused. And if you lose game one, you can't give up like the team that beat them in, 2017-18, even though that team had LeBron, but still. And so Siakam, once again, uniquely qualified in that, the 28. Yeah, let's go through the championship run that Siakam's team had, right? First round, they play the Magic. They lose game one. That's another example of what I'm talking about. In Toronto, the Magic win game one of that series, right? They did not get too low. They won the next four. They won in 5, as they should. And they crushed them every game except for game 3. They won by 19, 18, 19, and 5. So that game one clearly fluky, and they lost it, but they didn't get too low. They focused up, and they got it done, right? That's a demoralizing game one loss that you had to find a way to overcome. The next round, they played the Sixers in a crazy series, that best of 7. Then they played Giannis and the Bucks, fittingly, in the conference finals that year. For those of you who don't remember that series, the Bucks won games 1 and 2. And then the Raptors won 4 in a row to get it done, including a huge game 5 win in Milwaukee, right? He's been down 0-1 in a series they're expected to win. He's been down 0-2 in a series that his team maybe wasn't expected to win. That I think they were down in the finals before Durant got hurt, and like they had some fortunate injuries. And yeah, they were never trailing in the finals, but they were 1-1 after 2 games, and they were the home team. So he's been in so many different situations of, he's swept teams. Clearly, he's beaten teams he's supposed to, but he's also lost devastating game ones and been down 2-0 and won stuff, right? So every situation that could build you up as a person who could be a good veteran leader for a basketball team, all those tough situations, all the tough roles, seeing all the outcomes, having these vets in your team along the way, Siakam has seen all of them. He has been involved in all of them and on teams that have had to navigate every single one of them. I think that is so valuable for the Pacers. Not even just he's going to be a good basketball player, right? And I think he's going to be important in this series. We haven't seen him against the Bucks. And I think from an on-court perspective, the fact that he is the size he is against Giannis is very valuable. I think a quick adjustment in this series at some point could be putting him on Chris Middleton if Chris Middleton's size proves to be too much for Aaron Nesmith. I don't know that it will, but that seems like an easy switch to me if something's going wrong. Someone else to throw into the Giannis wall. Defensively, I think he's going to be extremely important. And the way the Bucks like to defend with drop coverage and keeping Brook Lopez back, if he can specifically punish his matchup, or at least if maybe Giannis is on him, if he can force Giannis to not be a roamer as much, if Brook Lopez is on him, if he can be hitting those 10 to 15 footers, if Chris Middleton's on him, if he can neutralize a typically pretty good defender, right? His role is extremely important. On the court, there's no doubt Pascal Siakam, one of the Pacers' best 2 players, sometimes their best, right? If he's on or if he's defending well, he's a massive X factor in the series on the court already. But I think that for a young team, right, 3 of their 4 guards that are going to play in the series never played in the playoffs before, ever, right? This is Jalen Smith and Aaron Nesmith. Yeah, they've been in the playoffs before. They didn't have roles. They were, not playing at all or barely playing in Nesmith's case, right? Basically, it's Siakam, Turner, Toppin, McConnell is the Pacers' rotation guys, and McDermott in this postseason who have real experience playing a lot. But Siakam, obviously, by winning a championship, supplants all of them by a lot. I think he's huge in this series in every way, on the court, off the court, a voice, a leader by example. And the fact that McDermott singled it out and then Siakam explained all of these factors that make him important, it all just kind of clicked for me. How important he's going to be in this series. I can't wait to see how he plays. I can't wait to see what it means for the Pacers. And we're getting very close to seeing it all happen. And I predicted already, if you heard the crossover show with Camille yesterday from Locked On Bucks, I picked Pacers in 7. I want to explain why a little tiny bit, because I used Giannis's injury in my analysis. Let's talk about that to close out this bonus weekend episode of Locked On Pacers. But first, we are going to talk about LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that is why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, who have the best tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just a job board. They help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role in a given month. Over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you are not looking on LinkedIn, look in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a pro on LinkedIn who know that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. And that's why LinkedIn is currently finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You could be next. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Let's close this out. The playoffs haven't started yet. Last episode before that happens, which is crazy today. Hey, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7. That's always streaming channel on YouTube and available on your Amazon Fire TV. I have a Fire Stick. I use it every day. In the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league like Locked On NBA, which I am on today. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, you heard it yesterday. If you didn't, great. Congrats, you get to hear it again today. I picked Pacers in 7. And if Giannis was healthy, I would not pick Pacers in 7. I would pick the Bucks to win. Look, it's really interesting that I have seen a lot more of everybody picking the Pacers in this series than I expected. I thought the Pacers would be a trendy pick because of Giannis's injury and because the Pacers did so well against the Bucks. When I really thought about it today, right, I think the reason I'm actually truly surprised about the number of people picking the Pacers is just because of the playoff experiences. Like, I think it matters a lot that the Bucks have won a championship. And yet, last year they got their butts kicked in the first round. So it's kind of hard to know what to make of them. But I think the experience is why I just don't know, because last year you saw the Cavs, for example, first playoffs, they admitted it. They were like, yeah, we weren't ready. And the Knicks just completely kicked their butt. And that's not to say that happens to every inexperienced team. I don't want to just lump them all into one bucket, but it matters. Experience matters. And so I assumed that what would happen is people would say, I think the Pacers have a good chance in this series, but then default to the experienced team with a former 2-time MVP on their roster. But the closer to the series we get and the more time everybody gets to think about it, like, these teams were 2 wins apart in the regular season. I think that's where I have kind of gone too much astray, is that it sounds in my head, and when you look at the rosters and the star power on Milwaukee, that like these teams have a gap, right? 3 seed, 6 seed, that's, a 3 seed gap. That's a big gap. It's 2 wins, right? 47-35 versus 49-33. That's not that big of a gap by point differential, which is just points per game you scored minus your opponent's points per game. Pacers had a better point differential than the Bucks this season. Pacers plus 3.1, Bucks plus 2.6. I think the Bucks are better, like, on the aggregate, but the Pacers beat them 4 times. Like, there's a lot of little stuff where I finally caught up to it and it made sense why everyone was picking, or at least more people than I expected were picking the Pacers. Now, I also picked the Pacers, so I can't say I'm not a hypocrite in that way. I was just surprised a little bit by how many people were all over this. A lot of people picking Pacers in 6, naturally, because game 6 would be in Indy. And by default, if you get to a game 6, one of the teams has 3 wins. If the home team wins game 6 and they already had 3 wins, it's over. I get it. I get why that's a pick. Here's why I picked Pacers at all. I picked 7 because it's Giannis. If he plays, we saw it during the season, they have no answer for that guy. But I think the Bucks have boxed themselves into a little spot with his injury. Here's a number that just exploded into my face today, right? So let's just start with Giannis, his on-off numbers. He played 2,567 minutes this season. The Bucks had a plus 5.99 net rating in those minutes. That's fantastic. 122 offensive rating. That's better than the Pacers. Like, that's crazy. 116 defense. Incredible. Giannis off the floor, 1,394 minutes for the Bucks. That's also a lot. Minus 4.29 net rating. That's terrible. 112.18 offensive rating, 116.46 defensive. The idea would be if Giannis can play in the playoffs, he plays 40 minutes. You barely have any of that time with him off. You have a lot of time with him on. Things are great. Here's the problem. There's a couple. One, he might not play to start the series. Someone in Bucks land said he wouldn't. Thing two, if he does play, is he actually at 100% where that gap will actually be that wide? That's over a 10 points per 100 possession gap. That's enormous. Three, let's dig a little deeper into this because that surprised me a little bit. That wasn't the number that exploded in my face. That was just, I was like, interesting. That gap seems wide. They have other stars in their team. I thought the plus number would be bigger. So I added in Dame to the mix. And here's where the explosion happens. Dame on, Giannis on. The Bucks in 1,756 minutes, plus 9.56 net rating, 123.95 offense, 114.38 defense. Incredible team, right? That's why all season, pretty much before the Bucks flamed out at the end of the year and then Giannis got hurt, people were like, they're the biggest threat to the Celtics in the East. At least smart people. And now, granted, I would have picked the Celtics to beat the Bucks in a series, but that is a jarringly good number. That's an incredibly good team at that point, right? And they have high-level wins. They beat the Bucks before Giannis got hurt right at the end of the season. But the reason that I'm combining the Dame Giannis numbers is because without Giannis, you have to look at Dame, no Giannis. With Dame on and Giannis off, 822 minutes for the Bucks this season, net rating of plus 0.49, 113.85 offensive rating, 113.35 defensive rating. That is crazy to me because I would expect that to be a really good offensive rating and a terrible defensive rating. And so that's the first number that made me stop and go, the Pacers are uniquely built to score well against the Bucks, who have not great perimeter defense. And they've done well against Dame this season. Not saying they will continue to do so. You can't draw again, I'm not trying to draw anything from the regular season games. Too much has changed. But if the tendencies of their players, like stuff that didn't just matter against the Pacers, but matter against everybody, continues, and they still stink at perimeter defense, and they can't get to that even net rating with Dame, no Giannis, which if Giannis isn't playing is a lot of the time, that's a big deal. And an even net rating isn't that good, and that means when Dame's not on the floor, that number drops. And oh boy, does it. We'll get there. Giannis, no Dame there. Also not very good. -2, 117.7 offense, 119.7 defense. So a lot of alarms sounding there. And then here's the kicker. No Dame, no Giannis this season. Bucks net rating is -11.37, 109.7 offensive rating. That's terrible. 121 defensive rating. It's not a lot of minutes. 571 is enough to be like, maybe this is a sample. That's 10 full games, or a little more than that, like 11 or 12 full games basically. But none of the percentages explode off the page. And 2-point or 3-point, it doesn't feel like an outlier looking at that. If there's no Giannis, any minute Dame is not on the floor, the Pacers could crush in those minutes. And that's why I think with Giannis out, the Pacers have a good chance to steal games. Not that they should be so favored against Dame, Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis, and Brook Lopez. That's a good team. You just heard the Dame, no Giannis numbers are fine, right? But the no Dame minutes, they're bad. And that is where I think, okay, that's made me more confident the Pacers can steal the Giannis-less games, and confident that if Giannis does play at sub 100%, there will be a lot of lineups that the Pacers can look better in than the Bucks. And so if Giannis returns in game 2, for example, and he's 100% by game 4, I will be wrong. I think that the Bucks would win the series in that case. But if Giannis doesn't return until game 3, or he's not 100% until later in the series, that's why I think the Pacers I already think they could do some damage against the Bucks, like fully healthy on fully healthy. I'd probably even pick Bucks in 6 or 5. I think the Pacers can win games. But given the injury situation of the Bucks, given Siakam being this X factor I just talked about, they're going to have the right leader on the floor. I think the Pacers can win this, and I think they should be considered the slight favorites given all the things I said, and that they were barely worse than the Bucks throughout the aggregate regular season. And I'm picking Pacers in 7, and I can't wait to see it. It all starts Sunday night. I'll be there on my podcast, Just Right on the Floor and Fiserv Forum. We'll see how it all shakes out. I hope you guys enjoy the ride that is the playoffs. We'll try to have as many guests as we can this week to break it all down from the Bucks side, from the Pacers side. We'll make it happen. Thank you all for listening. Continue to enjoy your weekend. I'm on Twitter or X if you want to yell at me for saying something dumb, at Tony R. Easton. The show is there at Locked On Pacers. Check out Locked On Bucks as well for the other side perspective here. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game Sunday night. We'll see you right when it's done.